Genesis 27:29, this is the blessing that Jacob stole from Isaac, from Esau through Isaac. We left off with kind of the tail end of it, where verse 29 says, "Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you." This last part is what we were working on last week. "Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." So we talked about that a little bit last week. That's the same blessing that was given to Abraham first. God said, "Those who curse you will be cursed, those who bless you will be blessed." And now that's been transferred over to Jacob. So again, it's an official movement of the promise and all of that onto Jacob. And remember that this blessing is actually a prophecy. It's a blessing, but it's a prophecy from God through Isaac. And he can only speak what God tells him to speak. That's why when Esau comes and says, "Give me a blessing too," we'll see in a few minutes that Isaac says, "I can't. I can only say what the Lord tells me to say." Because, like I said, it's not, we can bless someone, "Oh, may things go well," blah. That's just words for us. And good, we want good things to happen. But with this, it's an actual prophecy from God. This is going to happen, absolutely. The peoples will serve the descendants of Jacob, the Israelites, during David and Solomon's reign. They'll be lord over their brothers, over Ammon, Moab, Edom, and others that are related to them. So, but I wanted to kind of focus a little bit on this: "Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." Because we've talked about this a little bit before, that those nations that bless Israel are tremendously blessed. Those who curse Israel by attacking them, trying to take their land, those type of things, God answers this. He keeps this up, and they generally get destroyed, which is what has happened in the past. So any nation that has actually cursed Israel, attacked Israel, even if it didn't try to take it over, even if it was just raids into Israel, it doesn't matter. You do something other than bless Israel, and you're going to be in big trouble. Anything that's antagonistic towards them. And this is one of those, there's no requirement on this curse. God doesn't say Israel has to be following them or him or doing what's right. He just said this is how it's going to be in the story, period. And it's still active to this day. But up here we're going to look at nations that cursed or attacked Israel. And so you've got Assyria, Babylonia, Persian, Greek, Roman, Nazi Germany, Soviet Union. Now what happened to all of these? Do any of these exist anymore? They do not. What happened was they were all wiped out. Absolutely. Russia still exists, but the Soviet Union does not exist. Germany still exists, but Nazi Germany does not exist. And these are nations that specifically attacked Israel, and then God did exactly what he said he was going to do. They all were destroyed and no longer exist. And, people can say, well, that's a coincidence, and we would have to say, it's an awfully big coincidence. It's lasted for an awfully long time that any nation that attacks Israel gets destroyed, but even more so, as we looked last week, any nation that blesses Israel is blessed. The richest, powerful, freest nation in the world, who's that? United States. We've always been friends of Israel all the way back to the founding fathers, as we saw last week. George Washington and others were ones who were friends of Israel. Israel didn't have a nation at that time, so there wasn't a whole lot they could do. What they did do, though, was they made sure that Jews were protected and had equal rights in America, as opposed to everywhere else they've ever lived. And that's why there's as many Jews in America as there are in Israel, because we've always made sure that nobody attacks and bothers them here, as happened in Europe and all over any other place they've been. And by the way, all of that, the reason that happens to Israel is they're currently under God's judgment, and they will be till they turn back to him. When they rejected Christ, that brought the nation under God's judgment. And so they're being disciplined. He disciplines Israel when they don't do what he wants, but nations that curse them or attack them, he destroys and wipes them off the earth. At the same time, he uses them as tools. He used all of these nations, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greek, Roman, Germany, to be those who would bring about some of the discipline and punishment to Israel. They came into power because God brought them into power, or allowed them to be brought into power. And then they were used to work in Israel's life, and then they were destroyed. And then it went on to the next one. So, and the thing is, as long as we are on Israel's good side, we'll do okay. But unfortunately, in the last few years, our politicians and the bulk of our population have been moving away. They see Israel as the problem in the Middle East.
Right. True.
It's ridiculous, but it's, I guess, no more ridiculous than the other stuff that we deal with here now, that right's wrong and wrong is right. And, you know, because Israel never attacks anybody, they just get attacked, but it's their fault. It's their problem. And I don't remember one of the presidents, if it was Obama or who it was, I can't remember, or Clinton, but they always try to force Israel to not retaliate when the Palestinians attack. And during that time, it was the Prime Minister of Israel just asked him a question. He said, so, if suddenly Mexico decided to fire 2,000 missiles into El Paso and San Diego, you would do nothing? Of course not. You would mobilize your military and you'd wipe them out. Yet you ask us to do nothing, to not retaliate, to not fight back, things like that. And so unfortunately and what's interesting is, again, this is true. As we pull away from Israel, what's happening to our economy? What's happening to our freedoms? You know, what's happening to our nation? And guys, it won't be too long. We're going to get replaced by the Chinese economy. Just be aware that's coming. And they've been working for a long time to get their currency to be the world currency, the reserve currency. Ours currently is, and that's what makes us wealthy and powerful. When we lose that status, it's going to wreak more havoc on our economy than anything we've ever seen, short of the Great Depression.
Okay, so if I follow you, so if we're not treating Israel the way we used to, wouldn't we want to pray that it comes back to that? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. The Bible says, pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Israel. Pray that our leaders would wise up and continue to bless Israel. Those types of things. But we know that that's not going to continue forever, because when you read prophecy, it tells you in the last days, Israel's isolated. Israel has no friends except God. And that's kind of the point, because then he comes and protects them and defends them.
but how does that affect us then?
What's that?
It seems like unless we support Israel, we will go down.
Absolutely.
By it. So if Israel does its own good thing, goes to God,
Right.
and doesn't need us, and we don't go to them, so they fare well and we don't. Is that right?
Yes.
So how do we fare well in this situation?
We don't.
No, I mean there must be an opposite.
The only thing you can do is we pray that our leadership would continue to bless Israel, no matter what. And then America will be blessed. That's pretty much all we can do is continue to bless Israel. But prophecy tells us that eventually Israel will be alone. Doesn't matter. And also, this part of the world's not even mentioned in prophecy, meaning we don't really have much effect by then. It's all in the east. It's all Israel and the areas around Israel and to the east of Israel, which is amazing because what do we see happening today? Where's the growing economies? In the east. Korea, China, those areas, that's where commerce is moving. That's where power is moving. China's already making agreements with the oil nations to buy oil in their currency, thus displacing the American dollar as the currency. That's the first step in trying to get the dollar to no longer be the reserve currency.
So this is God's will?
It's God's plan. So yes. Yep. Okay, so now another thing that we did that's gotten us into huge trouble is this. Under George W. Bush, we started this plan of land for peace. The Palestinians want the West Bank. They wanted the Gaza Strip. They got the Gaza Strip. They want the West Bank. They want their own land. That's Israel's land. And the Bible's very clear. Anyone that tries to divide the land of Israel, God will destroy. And that's where we've gone with all of our peace talks was, if we just give the Palestinians land, there'll be peace. Which is funny because Arafat himself, the head of the Palestinians when he was still alive, said, our goal was to drive Israel into the Mediterranean Sea as though they never existed. They don't care how much land you give them unless you give them all of it. Has always been the plan. Now, leadership, they may have changed by now. I kind of doubt it, but it's possible. But we started on this idea. I just want you to, I pulled one example out that I'm going to show you this morning to see how clearly this works. In 2003, the U.S. began working on a land for peace deal. They called that the Roadmap for Peace. Remember that? That was to give away land and create two states, a Palestinian state and the state of Israel, both on Israel's land. And so they've been working on that all since then. And here's what happened shortly thereafter. Remember what I said, they began the plan in 2003, but it wasn't announced until September 21st of 2004. Okay, at 11 a.m., President Bush gives a speech to the UN General Assembly stating Israel must give up land to the Palestinians. Okay? And give up the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And like I said, now, at this point, we've already given up the Gaza Strip. Now, most of this I'm just going to read to you. It was going to be a lot to put up there. On the 21st, at 5 a.m., Hurricane Jeanne out in the Atlantic strengthened and was moving east-northeast away from the United States. Okay? At 11 a.m. on that day, Bush gave his speech. At this time, Jeanne began moving east-southeast. It was going away, and right after he gave his speech, it all of a sudden turned and started coming back, which hurricanes rarely do. On the 22nd, the next day at 5 a.m., it moves even more southeastward. Now it's headed south and east towards Florida. At 5 p.m., it starts to move southwestward into the land area. At 5 a.m. on the 23rd, it moves directly westward. What you see here is God's given us a chance. And he's got this hurricane that does this, and then starts moving straight towards Florida as we keep pushing this land for peace deal. At 11 a.m. on the 23rd, Jeanne strengthens while moving slowly westward. Then on September the 25th, at midnight and into early morning of the 26th, it makes landfall with 120 mile an hour winds. And then what we find is 3 million residents, Florida residents, were urged to evacuate trailer parks, islands, and flood-prone areas. Now here's what's interesting. We're telling Israel, evacuate the West Bank, evacuate the Gaza Strip, get your people out. What does God do to us? 3 million Floridians have to evacuate. And it happens at exactly the same time. And again, people say, oh, well, that's just coincidence. Well, you know what? There's hundreds of these events that occur exactly like this. So here's what else happened in that same time period. These are the hurricanes that occurred while the U.S. was pressuring Israel to give up land to the Palestinians. Now remember, there is no such thing as an ethnic Palestinian. Palestinian is someone who lives in the land of Palestine, which is Israel. The Romans gave it the name Palestine. They're Arabs. They're not, they're always on TV, on the news, they always try to make it sound like they're this separate ethnic group that's always lived on this land. No, they haven't. They're Arabs. They're from Saudi Arabia that have moved in a few hundred or maybe 1,000 years ago, but Israel's been there for thousands of years, and it's been their land. And there's lots of proof that it was their land and how big the land was and all of that. So here's what happened. Hurricane Charlie on August 9th through the 15th, see, the next year, 2004. Francis, August 24th to September 10th. Ivan, September 2nd to the 24th. Jeanne, September 13th. Aren't you glad you don't live there full time? Because where do most of these come into? Florida, the Gulf Coast area. These hurricanes cost the U.S. $20 billion in damage. So we're trying to force the Jews to leave their land, and we have more hurricanes in that period than we ever have. That many in a row, one right after the other, that bring this enormous amount of destruction. When God says, you curse Israel, I'm going to curse you, he is not kidding. It cost us $20 billion in damages from that. And so there have been, and if you really pay attention, you'll see there are quite a few of our disasters, natural disasters, will line up with things we're doing with Israel at that point in time. It's absolutely astounding. So I just wanted you to see a real world example, and you can find many of those. I told you about the book called Eye to Eye. I don't even know if you can still get it anymore. That only goes up to the 1980s. But basically all he does is he just takes the headlines from the news and puts them on one on this page and one on this page. America does this to Israel, and this is what happens. Europe does this to Israel. Do you remember back when, I thought this was interesting, when we came out with the roadmap for peace, land for peace? Do you remember Europe said, hey, we want in on this too. We were just doing it to us, just America. Europe says, we want in on this plan too. We want to be part of this plan to take away land and make peace. And that's the year. Do you remember when it got so hot in Europe that the asphalt was melting and the rivers dried up? Guess when that was? These idiots who were fine came out and said, no, we're a part of the peace negotiations as well, and that then included them in cursing Israel, and wham, it cost them billions and billions of dollars in damages to crops. Planes couldn't fly, it was so hot, all kinds of stuff. It wreaked havoc. Several of the rivers got so low they couldn't run barges on them anymore. The Volga was one, and others, and it happened exactly at the same time. So it's amazing when you sit down and look at this stuff. So pray for Israel. And pray for America that we'll stay their friends. All right, Genesis 27, 30 to 36. Okay. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau his brother came in from his hunting. This sounds like something orchestrated on a TV show, doesn't it? Because as soon as Jacob walks out, just a few minutes later, here comes Esau right behind him. Verse 31, he also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me. His father Isaac said to him, who are you? That would be a little disconcerting, you know. He answered, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him? Yes, and he shall be blessed. As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob, the grasper, the taker? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Then he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Now I'm going to go back to the beginning and we'll work through this, but I wanted to bring up one thing is where Esau says that he's cheated him 2 times and taken away his birthright. Did Jacob take away his birthright? He gave it away. He didn't take it away. But see, that's how we humans do it. We change it a little bit so that we're not the bad guy. We're not the one that's wrong. We just alter just a little bit. He took it from me. Well, Esau's the big, strong hunter. Jacob couldn't take anything from him. And he gave it up for a bowl of soup. I mean, yeah, he was hungry. But come on, you could have lived long enough to go and got some other food. But that's where we saw into the character of Esau. And the type of man he is, and why God skipped him and put the blessing on Jacob. And we'll see it even more as we go on. So, right after Jacob leaves, in comes Esau. And he's gone and killed the deer and made the food and all of that and asked for the blessing, but it's too late. Now, at first, Isaac is confused. It's like Esau just left. Who could this be? Sounds like Esau, but, Esau just left. But he figures it out pretty quickly. It dawns on him who that was that fooled him, Initially confused and immediately figures out it was Jacob. And he adds, yes, and he shall be blessed. He's clearly stating that this blessing cannot be taken back. It cannot be changed. It cannot be altered. This was a prophecy from God through Isaac to Jacob, and it can't be altered, changed, removed. He can't say, oh, I take it back, and we'll put it on Esau. God put it on Jacob. Now, Esau cries out for a blessing, but it's too late. Jacob has the blessing just as he has the birthright. Now, Esau hopes beyond hope that his father could give him another blessing. Just say another blessing. That's all you need to do. But again, he can't because it's got to come from God, and he can only speak what God tells him to speak. Which also kind of points us a little bit to the direction that Isaac, even though we're not given much detail, must have a fairly close relationship with God, that God speaks through him in this manner. Even though we're not really told. The only thing we're really ever told much about Isaac is, remember when Rebekah first comes with Eliezer the servant to meet Isaac, he's out in the field, he's meditating on God's word. Not meditating like Eastern meditation. Meditation on God and on God's word. Now, unfortunately for Esau, they're not Isaac's words. He can only speak what God puts in his heart, and there is no other blessing. So verse 37, Isaac answered and said to Esau, behold, I have made you Lord over you. Esau thinks it's bad that Jacob got the blessing. He doesn't know what's in the blessing. And now he finds out that Jacob's going to be Lord over Esau. That's got to make it 100 times worse. Behold, I have made him Lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants. And with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. So this actually really affects Esau. He's the big, strong, burly hunter, and here he is weeping. It's very out of character, so it's a big deal. And this is just my opinion, but I think Esau's... Now, did Esau get real upset about the birthright? I mean, oh yeah, he took it, but so what? So he didn't care all that much about the birthright, because the birthright is just a promise from God that you'll be the father of a great nation, have lots of descendants, and be the premier nation in the world. But that doesn't have a direct effect on the person. Like, is this going to happen in Jacob's lifetime? No. Is it going to happen in Esau's lifetime? No. It's not. It's going to happen down the line. And remember, Esau's a man of right now. Why did he sell his birthright for a bowl of soup? Because he wanted it when?
Right now.
Right now. Absolutely. And so it's much worse when he finds out that there's going to be Lord over him. But I think what really gets him is the blessing includes great wealth and power. Because remember what Isaac said to Jacob, you're going to be blessed by the dew of heaven. Your crops are going to grow like crazy. You're going to have lots of grapes, lots of grain, lots of animals, and others are going to serve you. So great power and wealth came with the blessing. And that's what Esau wants. He finds out it's much worse than he thought. Because now Jacob, not only does he have the blessing, he's going to be wealthy and powerful, but he's also going to be the Lord over Esau's descendants. And when it says that he made him Lord over all of his brothers, it means all of his relatives. Because some of the ones that he's Lord over are cousins, things like that. But so. Now, here's kind of a list. Jacob's brothers or his relatives, if you remember, what we've got are the Arabs, Ishmael, Isaac's half-brother. And then we've got Keturah's 6 sons, the final concubine that Abraham had, and she had 6 sons. And then we've got the sons of Lot, which again are related to them, through his daughters. Remember, through incest, they got him drunk, all of that. And that's Moab and Ammon. And these 2 nations also were nations, along with the nation of Edom, which is the nation Esau. The nation Esau founds is the nation of Edom, the Edomites. The Moabites, Ammonites, and Edomites all hate Israel and attack Israel and work with Israel's enemies, and they never are friends with them. But there are times under David and Solomon where Israel is Lord over Moab, Ammon, and Edom. And this area today, Moab, Ammon, and Edom, that's Jordan. That's the bulk of the land of Jordan. These are all nations that are right on the border of Israel. Now, these events have come about because it's Esau's own fault. Esau has no faith in God. Esau doesn't believe in God. Esau doesn't care about the birthright or the land or any of that. What kind of women did Esau marry? Canaanite women. Not supposed to marry the women of the land. So he's obviously going the opposite way God wants him to. Therefore, God's not going to give him the blessing and the birthright. It's going to go to Jacob. Verse 39. Then Isaac, his father, answered him and said to him. Now, poor Esau is going to get the opposite of the blessing. Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. He told Jacob, that's what you'll get. You'll be blessed with the fatness of the earth. You'll be blessed with the dew of heaven on high. That means, fertile soil, the fatness of the earth, the dew of heaven on high, rain. And if you've got those 2 together, you eat good amounts and you get great crops. By your sword you shall live. So he's going to go to a land where food's not going to grow well, and even animals, there's not going to be a lot of grazing for them. He's going to have to do it through fighting and taking over and spoils of war and things of that nature. And you shall serve your brother. I'm sure that's what Esau was just waiting to hear. You're going to serve your brother, whom he already hates. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. So Isaac gives a message to Esau. This is a prophecy. This is going to come true to the smallest detail as well. But it's not a good one. So this is the land of Edom, down here, where you see it at the bottom of the nation of Israel. It goes off to the east But it covers, and most of it's in the area that's known as the Negev, the wilderness, the desert. Not a lot of water, not a place to grow crops, those kinds of things. The bulk of his people, though, tend to settle in this area on the eastern side. Here is what their land looks like. It's all mountainous, and it's this type where it's very dry, not much in the, it's like Arizona. If you want soil here, you have to make it because it doesn't occur naturally. You have to screen the rock out, mix other stuff with it, and all that kind of thing if you want soil for growing a garden. And so this is the company that made the pictures, but this is the best picture I could find. But that's pretty much, and that's the land of Seir, S-E-I-R. So he and his sons, Esau and his sons, they go and attack these people and defeat them and take over their land. Why they want this land, I'm not real sure. I guess because it's close and they can. Now they do end up with one thing that does make them very wealthy that comes out of this land. When you look at this, does it remind you kind of Arizona? And what do we have a lot of in these areas in Arizona, just like this? Copper. And they do too. One of the largest ancient copper deposits is in this land. And it was the most important mineral in that day, because other than that, it was stone tools and whatnot. Copper was one of the first elements that they really started using. So, and here's one of their copper mines. Here's what's left of it. I'm very amazed at this type of rock, because in Arizona, we don't have copper in that type of rock at all. But you can also see copper, gold, silver, they're what they call hard rock mines. You don't have to put lots of timber and stuff, because it's inside solid rock usually that you have to work your way through. Whereas like coal is soft, and it takes lots of shoring up and so on and so forth. So that's an old part of an old copper mine. Now, one of Esau's descendants, he was a chief of a tribe. His name was Timnah. And there is a valley in Edom called the Timnah Valley. And in this valley are a group of copper mines that were worked for 500 years. I mean, that's a big copper deposit. Now, they couldn't do it like we do it, enormous amounts at a time. They had to do it by hand, and they couldn't get that much. But still, 500 years is a long time. And it was one of the most important minerals in the world at that time to make weapons, tools, plows, swords, spears, all of that. It's also used to make bronze, which was the next level. That's copper and tin. And bronze is harder than copper is. And in today's world, we think, why would you want a sword made out of copper? It's a relatively soft mineral, but it's way better than whatever else they had. The people who had copper technology defeated the people with stone technology. And then the people with bronze technology defeated the people with copper technology. And the people with iron defeated everybody. Larry?
Any idea how they separated the copper from the
fire, predominantly. Is they could only crush it up pretty much and use fire on it. Now, as the time went by, they did slowly improve those processes and find other ways, where eventually they did start using some chemicals much later on. But back then it was predominantly just, piling it up and setting it on fire and melting it out.
Isn't that the chemicals that they left over in Cottonwood? All those chemicals that they have over there in Cottonwood?
I don't know what I've never heard of this, but yeah, there's usually chemicals left if a mine's been somewhere. Because in modern days, we use chemicals to extract the minerals from it. We use acids and reagents and all types of things. The mine I worked at, we had two processes. It was interesting to me that in one process, the sulfide, the copper actually floated on soap bubbles, and all the trash sank to the bottom. And then on the second process, it was dissolved in sulfuric acid. And the copper would dissolve into the acid and would be extracted that way. But I always thought it was funny, though, that the heaviest element in ore would be the copper, but it floated because it was on soap bubbles. That's how they would extract it. In fact, the last year and a half, I think it was, that I was at the mine, we actually reprocessed our old tailings. Because even from the 60s to the 80s, they came up with much better processes of extracting the ore, and there was enough leftover copper in the old tailings that we could extract it and continue to operate. And that's what a lot of people do today. If they can find old mines, they go and if it's really old, they can only extract a very small percentage. Now, we can extract down to 0.1% of ore, copper, silver, gold, whatever it is, through modern methods. And so we can get a lot out. That's what they're doing. I don't know exactly what they're extracting over there in the big black pile of slag.
Right.
I'm not sure what they're taking out of it, but that's what they're doing. They're reprocessing the slag and taking minerals out of it. Might be lead, might be who knows what. But it's valuable enough to do it. So these copper mines were used for over 500 years. The Edomites did not make or create the mines. They took them over. They defeated the peoples there, took them over, and then they ran the mines for a long time and also got the great wealth that comes from having the mines and the copper. So it's, and I said it was also used in bronze. That's it. And this is one of the ways they were able to flourish, not just survive, but flourish in this land because of these copper mines that made them very, very wealthy there. And then an international study of copper mining was done in this valley very recently, and they actually were able to verify this story, this narrative, that the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, went there and mined the copper. And it's funny, it goes along with some very slow increments, and then suddenly there's a period where it jumps way up here in their ability to extract the ore and process it. And that's because Egypt made contracts with them to get the copper and came over with better metallurgical processes and helped them advance in extracting the copper. Now, so Isaac reinforces the fact that Esau will serve Jacob, which I'm sure made Esau very angry. But at the same time, he says the time's coming when you'll throw his yoke off your neck. So under Solomon and David, David subdued the land of Edom, and he put in a vassal, made it a vassal state, put in a governor, and they had to pay taxes to him. Under Solomon, he maintained that. But once Solomon died and Rehoboam took over, it split into two nations, and all the rest of the kings were pretty awful, Edom was able to break away and be its own nation for a time period until they were destroyed by others. Oh, and by the way, God curses Ammon, Edom, and Moab because they are the direct relatives of the Jews, but always hate them and always attack and harm them in different ways. Remember, you curse Israel, I curse you. And he says his curse is, I'm going to wipe you from the face of the earth, and that's what he does. He wipes out the Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Edomites to where they don't exist anymore. Okay, verse 41. I call this an understatement. Now, Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing. I think he really hated him, and we'll see that, with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching when I will kill my brother Jacob. Notice how easy this comes to him. Got a problem? Got a solution. Jacob's the problem? Kill him. Get rid of him. So again, it gives us insight into Esau's character. He has no problem killing his brother to get what he wants. Where does that take us back to? The very beginning. Cain and Abel, the very first siblings. So, you know, this whole sibling thing is not new, that siblings don't get along very often, that type of thing. So, he said, I will kill my brother Jacob. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. You know, us parents, we hear everything. Ears and eyes everywhere. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban my brother in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away. So they'll calm down. Esau's one of those, he's probably very quick to anger, but those people are usually fairly quick to calm down too over a time period, once he gets used to all of this. In verse 45, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. I'm not really sure he's going to forget, but at least maybe he won't want to kill him anymore. You know. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, Esau's wives, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me? So Rebekah is pretty tricky herself. We know where Jacob gets his trickiness. He gets it from his mom. She helped them fool their father, Isaac, and now she's working a plan to get him out of town until Esau calms down. So, what I want to kind of bring out before we get in depth in this is Esau and Jacob are, in the Bible, you'll find this very often, represent the two different kinds of people, men. The one who follows God and the one who doesn't. The natural man and the spiritual man. Cain and Abel were very much the same way. And we find that down through the Bible, we'll have this idea. In the very end, what we have is Jesus, the true righteous man, and the beast, the son of Satan. And again, the righteous man and the carnal, the sinful man. And you see these pictures throughout the Bible. So what do we know about Esau, the natural man? And this is for almost all human beings who just live by their nature, who don't have the Holy Spirit, the Bible to impress morals and commands and all that we have. Impetuous, does not think things through. You notice this much in the people around you in the world? Don't think things through? You know, man, you go out right now, how many people, or young people especially, are actually preparing for retirement? You know, every time we see statistics, it's very few. You know, they're not thinking, you know, I want what I want it now. That's Esau. Why are credit cards so popular? What does credit cards allow you to do? What do credit cards allow you to do? Yeah, I want it and I want it now, and this little card will get it for me. Now, it'll take me 40 years to pay for it, and I'll pay 10 times as much, but I can get it now. And again, do they think it through? No. This is common to the natural man. Are they controlled by the emotions and appetites?
Yes.
Absolutely. Most people, in fact, that's one of the hardest things for us as Christians, is to stop letting those things, emotions and appetites, control us, and then move the way God wants us to. So most people are, and we have a great example, especially by his appetites. What did Esau trade his birthright for? A bowl of food, because he was hungry, that appetite. There are lots of other appetites, but they're controlled by those emotions and appetites. You know, the Bible is very, I don't want to say anti-emotion. It tells us to be very, very, very leery of our emotions and never trust them. Because do they lie to us all the time? Absolutely. Our emotions lie to us all the time. It is our appetites that get us into trouble. It's our own desires. You know, James lays it all out for us. You know, don't blame God when you get into trouble, because it's our own desires, our own appetites that start the process of sin. So the next one, prone to anger. We see in that in today's world. You know, you're driving down the road and all of a sudden somebody cuts you off and pulls out a gun and starts shooting at you. You know, we have road rage. We have people going into schools and killing kids, going into malls, shooting their coworkers, shooting their bosses. We see that mankind is extremely prone to anger, and of course, don't believe in God or his commands. Yeah, and that's where we kind of are today. Then we have Jacob, who represents the righteous man. Even though at this point he's not really a righteous man, but as he goes through the process, he does finally get drawn to God. And we see that. So what does he do? He loves, and that's what the righteous man, he loves and seeks God. Not ignores God, not only loves and seeks him. He wants to know what his word says. We think things through, because the Bible tells us that all the time. Think things through. You know, rely on God. Think about what you're going to do. Patient. Okay? Like with Jacob, think of Leah and Rachel. Was he patient? He's all more patient than I was. 14 years to get the wife that he wanted. 14 years of hard labor where he got cheated constantly by Laban. Okay? He tries to live, you notice I said, I didn't say live by God's commands, because which of us fully lives by God's commands? None of us. We try to live by God's commands to the best of our abilities. And Jacob is pretty good at not being controlled by his emotions. He's much more level-headed than Esau is. He's much more of a thinker than Esau is. And so we see that again, not controlled by his emotions. Christians need to be very careful to not let our emotions control us, because they will lead us the opposite of God, and they almost always get us into trouble. You know? But yet, what is today's culture completely built around? How do you feel? If you go to a psychiatrist, what do they constantly ask you? You know, I see that all the time. And you want somebody to sit down and say, look, dude, it's my emotions that got me in this mess in the first place. Stop asking me how I feel and tell me how to get out of this and get it fixed. Because how we feel really doesn't matter. What matters is how we take care of it and deal with it and move on. But yet that's all they ask. And everybody you run into, they're only concerned about how they feel in the moment. You know, why is it that very, very few young men or women are going into the trades? Because it's not pleasant, it's not comfortable, it's hot, it's dirty. I don't feel good, even though they're very high-paying jobs. Right. You know, they all want to sit in an air-conditioned office on the top floor with a corner office, and they want to do that when they're 20. And surprise, surprise, they're working at McDonald's. flipping burgers, because that doesn't happen that way. So, now, this shows us how much God loves us, in that as messed up as Jacob is, or was, God still chose him, and then worked in his life to bring him into the man that he wanted him to be. You know, we see the same representation in Cain and Abel, same thing, and we see it down through the Bible. Now, here's an example of the difference between these two men here. What would Esau have done when Laban switched brides on him? Would he have worked another 7 years? No, he'd have just killed Laban and taken the woman he wanted. You know, he would have said, I'm not doing this. And yet, what does Jacob do? He works another 7 years to get the woman that he wants. So,
Perseverance.
yeah, he's willing to do what it takes to get what he needs. So we find that Jacob works another 7 years to get the bride that he wants. So, as we saw in this instance, as generally is the case, mom knows what is going on. Moms generally know what is going on in a family, and so Rachel knows what's going on. She hears that Esau plans to kill Jacob. See, Esau didn't keep him to himself. You know, if you want something to remain secret, how many people can you tell? Yourself, that's it. Or like what they used to say, you can tell one other person, but then you have to kill them. You know. She's a very smart woman. We've seen this with Rachel. And she realizes there's only one way to save Jacob. He's got to get out of town. And it's got to be far enough that Esau's not going to go after him. And she has the perfect place. Her brother, Laban, way up there in Mesopotamia. Let's get him up there. Also, does Jacob have a wife? No. Esau has two. So we know Jacob is in the marrying age. Where does he need to get a wife? From his family. So that's kind of a dual thing. Get him out of town, but getting up where Laban is so he can get a wife that's from the lineage of Abraham, as they were commanded to do. And so here's a map of where they would go. The blue line there, that's where Jacob traveled and his stops to get all the way up there to the area of Haran and Padan Aram up there. That's where Laban is, and that's where he's going to find not one wife, but two wives. How many did he want? One. But he didn't get the one. And I think a big part of this, though, is funny. Jacob the trickster gets sent to Laban, the much better trickster. And then Jacob has to live under what he does to people being done to him. Because Laban constantly messes with him, changes his wages, does all kinds of stuff, cheats him, so on and so forth. So, she wants to send him to Laban, but can Rebekah by herself send him to Laban? Who has to do it? Isaac. The leader of the family is the only one that can give him the permission to go there. So notice how good that Rebekah is, how sneaky she is. What does she do? She goes into Isaac without saying anything about needing to get Jacob out of town because of Esau. What does she say? I will die if Jacob marries another one of these awful Hittite women. I just won't make it. And she lets it be, these women are sneaky. She lets it be Isaac's idea. It's not really his idea, but he thinks it is. Well, then we should probably send him back to Haran so he can, get a wife from our lineage, which is her plan in the first place. So she sneakily gets Isaac to be willing to send him. And then we're going to pick up with that story. We're going to go away from Esau and Isaac, and we're going to now begin to follow Jacob as he goes through the things he goes through. That type of thing. So we'll pick that up next week.